February is the shortest of months, as everyone knows, so I had less time to check stuff out. Hopefully though, I still have enough here to keep the video entertaining, even if there aren't exactly a ton of people here to watch this. This month I got to reading in particular, some books and some comics, while also catching up on some games I really should have played back in the day. So let's get to it.
That's my mom!
There goes the space-time continuum.
Drive Surprise Future it's a fine summer movie. I think it only being an hour long helped it not overstay its welcome, because it has really nothing interesting going on. It wasn't really that bad. The whole idea of a future where Steinbelt goes evil and takes over the world with Roidmudes could have worked, but I don't like the idea that if the Roidmudes win, it becomes a dystopian hellscape. I feel like that flies in the face of the Roidmudes being heroic from the other side of the viewpoint. Like, from their perspective, they're supposed to be the heroes, but they're becoming a dystopian land. It doesn't work for me. The villain being Dark Drive was whatever. It's so weird to me that with Gold Drive, Proto Drive, and Dark Drive, there are 3 alternative drives of which each either is or has been a villain at various points. And like, the action was cool, the plot twist was predictable but not bad, and the movie definitely has its moments, but it feels extremely small scale and like nothing really happens despite the concept of the story. It went in one ear and out the other. Maha and Chaser didn't feel like they got much to do, Ghost is just completely different to how he actually is in his show, and I don't remember any of the other Roidmudes appearing for much if ever. I just don't feel like Shinosuke being a father really got developed as much as it should have either. I think this movie would have worked better if it came out after Bano was revealed as a villain, and the story had something to do with stopping Bano from this secret extra plan he has to win, focusing primarily on Shinosuke being a father and trying to develop that. But even then, Chaser and Maha have very little to do, and you can only do so much with Shinosuke being a father when he doesn't know he loves his future wife yet. It's really strange, maybe just inherently flawed. Type Special was badass though, and a great finisher with the father-son rider kick.
We come in peace, shoot to kill, man.
I was lucky enough to stumble into a retro video store out far from where I live, and while I was there I was able to pick up $100 worth of various PS2 and Wii games, one of which was this. As a big Star Trek fan, I have never gotten around to playing any of the games. And for the most part, I really enjoyed this one. I like the general premise. Each of the original 5 shows, plus the Next Generation movies, each get their own dedicated campaigns where you get to play as their main ships. The mechanics took a bit to get used to, but I was able to enjoy the space combat pretty well. Some of the missions were genuinely really great, but there were also quite a lot that sucked. Star Trek Enterprise had only 3 missions, and they were all terrible. The first one I can forgive as just a tutorial, that's fine, but the second mission involves one of my least favourite mechanics of the game, chasing warp trails. Essentially, you fly around slowly, scanning a bit of green fart cloud, and then you follow it, and then you scan for another fart. It's terrible. And the third mission was an okay but forgettable chase with a kinda cool ending. Very disappointed with the NX-01's awful mission selection. The original series, however, definitely had it better, but with some nasty bumps. The first mission is an escort mission, which is fine, I guess. The second mission is one of my least favorites in the game. Invisible mines everywhere that just fuck up your shit something chronic. It's nasty and ridiculous and terrible. The next 2 missions are actually pretty cool though. You get to play as a Klingon ship infiltrating Klingon space. The previous mission ended with you not being able to destroy a Klingon ship because you need to use it, and this one kinda rewards you for that. The next mission I really like too, where you're crippled and have to destroy everything attacking you in a desperate attempt to survive. It's great. You start with, you can't move but you can shoot anything. Oh, now your phasers don't work, now your torpedoes don't work, now your mines don't work. Essentially just limiting your options as it goes on, so you can, strategically plan out your attack. Or I guess your defense. And the final Genesis planet mission is really cool, with a lot of space combat and a fun escape at the end. Next Generation also got a pretty good hand. The first mission was fine, the second mission had some fun space combat to it, and the last 2 missions were also very fun. Disappointingly, Deep Space Nine only got 2 missions. Especially sucks given the Defiant is the only main ship in the game with a different weapon loadout, having rapid fire cannons instead of constant lasers. And this first mission is decently fun, but the second mission has this insane part where you take control of the fully loaded out main space station, and that's badass. Though the bit where you destroy asteroids sent at the base goes on a bit too long. Voyager then really pissed me off. The first mission is one of my least favourite in the game. I hate the chase mechanics. One touch from the enemy Kazon ship, and you go flying off course and cannot recover. You slightly miss 1 turn. Just restart, you're never catching up unless you had a massive lead going into the fumble. I had 16 restarts in this level, all from failing these bullshit chase missions. The game's turning controls are great for not only feeling like you're in a large massive spaceship moving kilometers with every turn, but also just general space combat. However, for precise races it does not work, and you have to do 4 of them in this one level, all to lead up to the reveal that you have found the truth behind a mystery from an episode of Next Generation that occurred years before Voyager even began. The second mission also kinda sucks, but I like the ending bit of going around planets stopping the Borg from blowing them up. The third mission is actually really fun. It has some cool stuff involving Species 8472. You fight them, then you work with them in what feels like a huge mission, taking out the massive Borg Uni complex. But it goes on for way too long. It could have been split into 2 solidly good missions. One where you fight Species 8472, take on the Borg, and then help defend Species 8472's crippled base from the Kazon fleet, and then a different level dedicated just to the huge Uni-complex battle. And then the actual 4th mission is a pain, it's another bullshit chase versus the Borg Queen, followed by an okay final battle. And then you get Star Trek Sovereign, or just the Next Generation films. To be honest, I didn't bother finishing it. The first mission involves some absolutely bullshit one-hit and you die mechanics, a terrible escort segment that made me put the game down. I had died so often and was just bored and frustrated with the game. I have no shame in saying it, I have no problems reviewing it when it's really not a story-driven game and one final level, even if it was perfect, would not save the game. This pissed me off. And the game overall, I think is okay. It has some very fun missions and some really annoying ones. I enjoyed it, I had a good time with it, but I think it's just okay. Last year, I went and purchased as many LEGO games as I could that I'd never gotten the chance to play before, now that EB Games had opened up its vault of retro consoles like the early PlayStations and the Wii. Starting with LEGO Batman the video game because I forgot that Indiana Jones 1 came first. LEGO Batman is definitely an old LEGO game. I understand there needs to be some leeway given to it, its combat mechanics, abilities list, roster, and mission structure is very feeble overall, but that's not a bad thing. Complete Saga is still up there as one of, if not my favourite LEGO game, with the original trilogy and the first one naturally being some of the best too. LEGO Batman has some impeccable vibes. I didn't really mind the lack of a story given how simple everything was, the levels were mostly really engaging because of their style, but that said, I think LEGO Batman is a heavily flawed game. I got so sick, for instance, of the flood of enemies. With combat this simple, I think LEGO games need to manage how they actually do combat encounters. Don't have too many enemies at once unless the characters have a good amount of crowd control potential. The Jedi Slam in LEGO Star Wars made it so that when a huge swarm of enemies came at you, it wasn't too bad, you didn't feel like it was just getting in the way. Other LEGO games also have multiple ways to deal with enemies beyond just punch, one ability and one grab, along with more abilities overall. But maybe the worst part about the game is how repetitive it is. You only play as Batman and Robin in all 15 of the main levels. It's really dull. I like Batman and Robin, and the amount of suits they have does help, but there's no sense of expression or variety in giving you options. And there's almost no difference between these two when the flood of enemies come out, because the suits don't really affect combat without upgrades. It made it really monotonous. The villain levels thankfully did make it a lot better. For the most part, you always get a different secondary character joining you, aside from the odd vehicle mission, which overall were quite fun but also not very good at the same time. That made the villain missions more fun. There's not much difference mechanically between Bane, Killer Croc, and Clayface, but they all animate differently. I like the variety in that. How it feels to be like, now I get to play as this character I like, instead of just, I'm playing as the same mechanic again. The villain missions were just generally better. And the 2 bonus missions were just okay. And after that, the only things to do were replay the same missions in free play. There's almost no bonus missions generally, this is before hub worlds are properly introduced, there's very few collectibles or anything to do with what you get. There's some bonus hostages which aren't kept track of and the game doesn't tell you what levels you've got them in. If you save them though, you get to unlock Hush, who is nothing special, but at least he looks cool. As much as I did enjoy this game, I think it's fairly weak among LEGO games. Its repetition and kind of boring feel over the long term give it a lack of longevity compared to a lot of the other ones for me. I still like it, but it's not great. I started Get a Robo Apocrypha last year, and man, I could not bring myself to finish it. It opens with a lot of sexual assault and for the most part, has a lot of hentai adjacent content in it throughout, and that's the big thing holding this whole story back for me. It's so fucking horny. It thinks that adding a bunch of tits and vagina and cum makes for a mature adult take on the franchise, down to a point where an adult woman jerks off our not adult protagonist and slurps up his semen. It's fucking vile. And it really doesn't help this series stand out when the action isn't all that interesting. Most of it is spent on backstory setup. We get some story, and then the last few volumes are entirely devoted to a little bit on Nagade and Jin's development, and then the rest is entirely for this new version of Musashi, who is a female, and obviously the writer's pet because she is the whole focus of the end of the manga. And then it just kind of ends. Awful manga. I hated Apocrypha Dash. Frankly, there's little to say about Getter Robo Anthology. For the most part, the individual stories are okay. I think it's interesting how each of them have a through line connected to the forecoming of Getter Emperor. In fact, with Musashi, seeing him in the intermission between his last moments and actually dying is quite interesting, given that Musashi is the pilot that Getter Emperor creates to represent itself in Getter Arc. That's quite cool. But man, I wish the last minutes of the universe chapter was more expanded upon. Lagaus is never elaborated on, and Getter Emperor finally gets to throw hands just to punch her in the head and kill her. That's never explored and could have been genuinely interesting, but most of the chapter has nothing to do with that. It's a fine anthology. Dino Getter is fine, it's nothing special at all, it's a completely serviceable short little manga, featuring cool enough versions of the characters, though not as cool as they are normally. All building up to a storyline that, like almost every Getter manga out there, doesn't have a fucking ending. But the Dino Getter is cool, even if it didn't really get a chance to show off the dino forms much. Getter Robo Devolution might be my favourite Getter Robo series. I have to say might be, because in many ways it doesn't follow the spirit of the franchise, with the Getter Emperor being a hero in this universe and evolution into the Endless being portrayed in a more heroic light. The concept of evolution being constant until the point of forcing it to transcend the limits of our universe is treated with a lot more positivity here, making it more feel like a spin-off of Gurren Lagann, which debuted years before this entry in the Getter franchise. At the same time though, while I think it fails to capture the specific intrigue of Getter as a series, and its commentary on the ways in which power creep is not as good and positive as most shonen portrays it, it's also a very engaging storyline, with it starting as just another alternate take on Getter, transitioning to revealing the Getter multiverse, and then revealing the truth of it all being fake and part of a cycle of endless simulated growth that the real world Getter is creating, all just digital worlds in the head of the real Getter Robo. The will of the universe takes the Getter Emperor's form almost to taunt and insult mankind, and this fake Emperor has to fight another not quite Emperor, the Devolution Getter, which is basically a forced evolution that is its universe equivalency to the Getter Emperor, though not a natural incarnation of him that evolved by normal means. I really like this version of Ryoma. I think him being so different is fully justified in the context of the story, and as usual Musashi or Benkei or whatever is the absolute goat and I love him. There's also a ton of references to past Getter entries, even the pilots of Go get to show up briefly. It's a great manga genuinely, with a really engaging storyline and for once, an ending. One that implies that it was all a prequel and the events of the original Getter Robo come after the universe created by the clash between emperors. And you know what, I guess it does help the thematics of it all. Like, the Emperor itself is still a bad thing in the other universes. In fact, he still isn't a good one in this universe. He kills the will of the universe. A commentary more on how the meaning of life is something we should define for ourselves and not what we're told it should be by anything else. I think the big thing that gives this manga a boost and would allow it to match Arc for my favourite is it actually has that finish. The storyline is done. That's not on Arc, sometimes creators just pass away and their work's never concluded. But the bottom line is that I really liked Devolution. It was really good.
If this is where the monarchy is headed, count it out!
So like most people, I've read The Wizard of Oz. But it wasn't until recently that I decided to read the other 39 books in the mainline canon, or at least the other 13 written by Baum himself. Thus comes in the second book, The Marvelous Land of Oz. Whereas The Wizard of Oz was a fun and simple romp, Marvelous Land includes more of an overarching story. It's less about look at Dorothy going from point A to point B for the sake of trying to get home, and more about our hero Tip on a journey with Jack Pumpkinhead, the Sawhorse, and the Scarecrow to save the Emerald City after it was overthrown by the evil Queen Ginger. It still has a lot of non-sequitur moments and characters. There's a whole moment where they fly a new and awesome character called the Gump over and outside of Oz, then they crash, they find out they have pills that can make any wish come true, make a wish to restore the Gump so they can fly back to Oz, and then lose the box with the magic pills, making the entire escapade rather pointless. But that is kind of the Oz vibe. It's a lot of unrelated moments and scenes that don't really add much most of the time, but I did like most of the characters. The Wogglebug especially was really funny to me. The characters in these books almost talk as if they're in a Ryan George skit without the self-awareness, to agree more than other books I've read for this time period. Everyone loves to over-explain and overly word their sentences, but in a very charming way. The most interesting part of the book is that ending. Tip turns out to have been born a woman known as Ozma, and then turned into a boy at birth against their will. Tip is then turned back into a woman and lives as Princess Ozma. It's oddly progressive from a certain point of view. There is obviously something to be said for how this book was written decades before the word transgender even existed. And like, on one hand, Glinda the Good Witch tells Ozma it's not okay to pretend to be something you're not, and thus it's deceptive, but at the same time, Ozma chooses of their own will to try being a woman. Everyone accepts that choice and lets them make that decision. And the idea at all of someone who was raised as a boy, told they have to be a boy, but being open to explore whether or not they really fit that identity and what they were told to be, is ahead of its time. In general, I like this book. I thought it was fun, but I do hope that later books iron out some of the pointlessness. Okay, we're going to go through a quick lightning round of Living Corpse comics, because I started to get into the comics from the animated comic ranking films, and we're starting on Living Corpse Haunted, which is only because I couldn't find the original Living Corpse run or the omnibus of all the runs. So I started with Haunted. It was fine. I don't know, I don't remember much about it. I think it's just John Romero going to a building and killing a ghost, and that's it. And War of the Independents isn't going to get much of a look in either. It's a fine crossover with some fun stuff, and then it just kind of ends suddenly. And finally, we get to the first actual notable Living Corpse comic. It's just okay. I like Lilith in this. I think the Living Corpse himself is fine. I was glad to see him kill Bigfoot. The storyline wrapping up the drama with John's son was nice though, and it was definitely the most tightly written story I've read with the Living Corpse yet. There's no pointless detours, it's a solid point A to point B storyline, and it's fine.
I want her to step on me.
That is definitely inappropriate.
So like with Oz, I had read the first Narnia book and decided to go into the other 6, so I purchased the big anthology that has all of them in chronological order and not release order, and the first book was Magician's Nephew, one of the ones I was most interested in. It was fairly solid. While the Praise Jesus themes are very strong in this one, I honestly felt like they were fairly well integrated, if only because the strongest messages the book gives you are along the lines of having integrity is good, apologize and make up for your mistakes, be a good person. I liked Polly and Co. Janus was a fucking badass and also entertainingly heinous, and I just love how Narnia is written. It's magical in how things are described. Oftentimes something majestic is not just told in terms of this is how it looks, this is how it smells, this is how it sounds, but rather there are things explained to you through the intangible feelings that other characters experience when looking at them, and that's great. Uncle Andrew was hilarious as a villain because he's such a pathetic simp, and the cabbie was goated. Bro gets sent to another universe with his horse and sees a lion sing reality into existence, and all the cabbie has to say is, "Alright, calm down mates, let's see what's going on." And then he becomes the first king of Narnia? That's wild. I thought it was good and cool. I like this book. And the last Living Corpse comic I read was Relics. It was an interesting one because it's just cosmic out of nowhere. I did enjoy finally doing something with Astaroth and letting us get an idea as to his character a bit more. They do more with the previous Gatekeeper as well, which is cool. I like how it expands the lore of the Living Corpse for once. However, I really didn't like Lilith's storyline of being dragged in to be sexually assaulted by a horde of her people, and then deciding to just let the entire universe be destroyed until a very basic monologue convinces her not to. It's weirdly out of place and gives me nothing but uncomfortable vibes. Otherwise, I like this villain a lot. I like the usage of Astaroth as more than just a guy that tells John where to go and what to do. It's fine. The Chickenhare comic is only 200-page long issues. It's awesome, and I'm upset that Bro wasn't successful enough to continue them. As simple as it is, just Chickenhare and his buddy Abe coming across a taxidermist, befriending a weird demon girl Meg and an asshole monkey demon Banjo. It's awesome. They go on some adventures escaping the taxidermist, then they later go into the fucking bowels of hell and escape. I love the snappy writing, the fun characters, the engaging banter. I had so much fun reading about how these assholes interact. It's so fun. Honestly, I'm upset by the Chickenhare movie now. Like, Chickenhare in the film is a self-conscious loser boy with a generic learn to love what makes you different storyline, but in the comic he's a confident, sick-ass dude who doesn't take shit from anybody. Abe went from a snarky but reliable guy to a constantly whingy, whiny baby guy, and Meg went from a cool-ass, batshit crazy, borderline psychopathic monster girl to a generic girl boss type character, and Banjo didn't even get adapted at all. I want more of this comic, but I don't think I'm going to get it, which is a damn shame. Right, Asia is another David Attenborough documentary that finally came out in Australia. I don't have much to say as usual, it's a magical experience and a great watch, nothing I can really review.
I will fuck the shit out of that robot.
So I had watched Fate Extella be played before. I knew all the story beats and all that happened, but I only recently got a chance to play it for myself, specifically Umbral Star, and honestly, it's okay. I really like Fate Extella Link. I think the gameplay is fun, and while the story is a bit short and all over the place, it doesn't waste your time and is still very enjoyable. with a fun new character in Charlemagne, and a really interesting premise in how he and Karl de Grosse are related. Fate Extella the Umbral Star, however, is kind of the opposite situation. It has 4 main stories, of which one is obviously not the important one. Nero's is the first one. In it, you immediately get to see most of the game's problems at once. You only get to play as 2 characters, Nero and Emir. Nero is fine, but Emir was my go-to because I enjoyed his combos more, and I really liked how he played in Extella Link. But the gameplay is really repetitive. I know it's a Muso game. You should expect that, but not this quickly. You only get to use your Noble Phantasm once per round, and really, that means you're just going to be using it on bosses. You only have your basic combos, of which you need to level up a decent bit to get anything beyond the initial 3 moves, and you have your Extella maneuver, which is a really long and slow way to take out large groups, and basically your main weapon in the game. The spawning of plants, which make new aggressor units, which are what you need to kill to take over territories, and can be sent out to take over the other territories you already own, is way more aggressive than I remember. Extella Link did not have plants spawning this much. They show up so often and so frequently that I'm almost thinking it's a bug, because you're constantly having to deal with them, to the point where most levels, even those with their own gimmicks, feel the same. It doesn't matter if a level has its own unique fun gimmick if you're still spending most of your time fighting the rapidly spawning plants. And you have to play I don't know, 5 or 6 of the same mission in every storyline using the same 2 characters with no variety. And this part of the story is fine. It's an okay introduction to what's going on and a good setup for the end. I think Nero's story is enjoyable as a story. Tamamo's is not. While Nero did have some problematic character issues, basically cementing her in the franchise as the one-note, me-love-things, loud bombastic character with almost no depth, Tamamo goes in the absolute wrong direction and plays her up as a love-struck puppy with no depth at all. It's not entirely off base, but it feels wrong. Any of her interesting depth or nuance is absent entirely from this game. Her story also feels like an afterthought. I feel like nothing was gained, and all that was done was, everything, this whole thing, it just exists because of the necessity to give Tamamo a story. Her version of the Master is boring, and the overall narrative just sucks. For her, you only get to play as Tamamo and Kana. This is where I should note that each of the first 3 storylines ends with the same boss fight. It's pretty okay, but very repetitive and often very slow, and again, you're just playing the same kind of mission over and over again. Finally, of the main stories, you get Alteras, which is clearly where all the time went into. For this, you get to play as Altera and Gilgamesh, both of whom are very fun, but importantly, the story actually gets to go somewhere. This is where the interesting plot revelations sit. This is where Altera gets developed. She is easily the best character in the game. She conflicts with her initial programming and role as a destroyer, going against what she wants to be, because she doesn't want to be a killer, but she doesn't think her dream can come true. It's an interesting storyline and a decently developed one. The difference between Hero Altera and Titan Altera are striking. It's a great way to immediately throw you off guard. You only get to see the Hero Altera for the previous 2 storylines, so when you meet the Titan version, it's a big shock, because oh, there's a giant one, and also she's really nice. I did genuinely love seeing the bond between Altera and the Master grow, and the moment of her fighting back against Sepho has so much more weight than the other 2, who basically just fight some random big monster. But here, Hero Altera is sacrificing herself to ensure that she might never get her dream, but nobody else's dreams have to be taken away due to her actions. Unfortunately, this is where I'll bring up that this game's cutscenes can go on for fucking ages, taking forever, and really just leaving you wanting to get to the action. Now, most games I feel can suffer from this in the Fate series, except for the impeccably well-paced Samurai Remnant, because a lot of them kind of try to harken back to the original visual novel style, where it was okay because there was no action, it was just reading. But it feels worse here because of the action-packed nature of the gameplay. At least with a standard RPG or Fate Grand Order, the slow pace of the cutscenes kind of matches the relatively slow-paced, more thoughtful gameplay, but here, because the gameplay is all high-impact action, well, the slow cutscenes are jarring. And then there's the final storyline, arguably the grand finale, where you play with just Nero and Emir again. You get a redo of their storyline, and this time you save the day. It has some of the best character moments, the most fun cutscenes, and generally the most enjoyable things of any of these parts. It also has the shittest finale. Nero gets an immense power-up into Saber Venus, and then unceremoniously takes out 2 spheres that can't fight back after killing swaths of basic enemies that can't fight back. Fucking lame. The story of this game is decent, probably on par with Extella Link, but for different reasons. They are good for different reasons and held back for different reasons. But where I think this game fails to me is the gameplay. It's really lacking compared to what I'm used to in a Muso game. To an extent, even worse than like Berserk and the Band of the Hawk, which has a shockingly limited roster. But in this game, you only get to play as 6 characters across 4 storylines. You can only play as the other servers in free battle, or in their own dedicated 3-part stories. But don't let that fool you. This game recycles the same few missions with each character of a given faction. Artoria, Elizabeth, and Archimedes are the only characters with unique side stories. This means for each faction, every character gets you playing through the same missions, meaning finally having variety in the characters you play as is thoroughly undone by not having variety in the level choices. It's fucking annoying and I hate it. This could have been a great time, and I know that because I think Extella Link is a pretty great game, but instead Umbral Star is kind of lame. I almost wish I just went back to never playing it so I can continue holding on to the idea that it was a decent game purely off watching the cutscenes. No. Oh, Tintin comics. Okay. I started with the first of the Tintin comics. I was shockingly underwhelmed. I like parts of it, I liked its comedy at points, and I found Tintin charming, but it was otherwise kind of lacking. It has some very blunt and uninteresting commentary about Soviet Russia, and a very all-over-the-place storyline that goes back and forth randomly. There's a whole bit where Tintin gets home, decides to go back to Russia one more time, is minorly inconvenienced, and then decides, nah, I'm too tired, I'm going back home. And that's how the story ends. It's such a random, nonsensical ending, and I think as anything, Land of Soviets is lacking and underwhelming. I don't hate it, but I'm not very sold on it. It's kind of but at least Land of the Soviets isn't.
Whoa, is that blackface, dude?
So Tintin in the Congo was bad. It's about 30 pages shorter, and thank God. At this point, Tintin and Snowy were both fine characters, but this completely changed my ability to look at them in a good light for a while. In Land of Soviets, Tintin was some generic guy who beats anyone in his way and is investigatively smart. In the Congo, Tintin is a poacher, one of the most vile and disgusting types of people on this planet who all deserve to suffer. He also might be one of the other most vile and disgusting types of people on this planet, because the comic is also racist. I know it wasn't meant to be. Hergé, I actually don't know how that one's pronounced. Like, the author regretted this one long after it was released and how, like, he was led astray by his country and people about what the people of other countries are like. So this wasn't intentionally racist. It was ignorantly racist. He was assuming what he was told was accurate. But it's an uncomfortable read-through. Racists and poachers are two of the worst kinds of people. This comic made Tintin into both at varying degrees. It's all over the place. There's no solid through line. There's a narrative that just kind of starts happening. Tintin happens into being a tribal leader of 2 tribes because the book thinks he's superior to them. And suddenly there's this extra group of baddies and Tintin just takes them out. It's weird, strange, and awkward. I do not like this one. I'm hoping Tintin picks up later.
America!
Okay, now Tintin I think is starting to get better. I think in America still has issues like the fact that it's a bit racist, but we are at a point where it's feeling like, yeah, it's racist today, but for the time it goes out of its way to portray Native Americans as the victims of that whole situation, and only antagonists when manipulated and lied to. The story felt a bit more solid. It's not as prone to the and then something happened and Tintin lived style of writing. It actually had a through line. It is weird how Al Capone goes from the main threat to barely a footnote in the story though. It definitely isn't as tight as I'd like from such a widely praised series of comics. I think I'm starting to get into it though. Tintin's charming, Snowy's fun, and sure things will pick up. Don't have too many more thoughts on In America. It's still a bit too and then shit happened for me to really love it or spend too long on it.
You have such a good poker face, Yugi.
Yes, I do. What's poker?
Cigars with the Pharaoh is actually some good shit. This one has a much tighter story, where cause and effect seems to actually apply. This is when the racist elements genuinely start to feel like product of its time, as opposed to just racist. It's much less racist than most of its era. The actual progression of the plot and the mystery as to what the fuck is going on and what the cigars are actually about is much more engaging than what came before it to me. This storyline also introduced Thompson and Thompson, who are quite endearing and also fun. Rawanj Batala is also quite a likable character and one of the first non-whites to actually be portrayed as just, you know, no different to you or me innately. It all flows surprisingly smoothly. The card chase at the end was surprisingly intense, given how calm most of those tend to feel. The first Tintin story that I genuinely quite liked and thought was well made. I only hope they continue to improve.
What we got here is the flower itself, so I'm going to pack this in a bowl and start hitting it.
Yeah, so I had fallen into the trap of getting addicted to Tintin by the point of the Blue Lotus. It was great. The tighter story, yet a lot of surprisingly engaging moments of the story unfolding, and while it does fall into some of the same traps of Tintin just happening to escape danger by sheer luck all the time, and a good amount of long exposition pages, they are, once more, much less than the predecessors. Tintin even has a moment here to talk about stereotypes and how they're wrong, crazy, and for as not great as the portrayal of the Japanese was, I can't exactly act like how the main villain kept adding words to his screaming of samurai to express anger wasn't, shamefully, at least a little bit funny to me. The villain reveal wasn't too shocking, if only because I knew that Rasputin was Tintin's main villain, but I'm very surprised in a good way to see how naturally this follows on from Cigars of the Pharaoh. It actually continues the chronology, expands on the story. There's a lot of multiple characters working together to solve the problem. They all feel like they matter. Tintin in these last two stories feels like he actually wants to be involved for the first time. He's not just there on a job, there's people in danger, and that's what actually motivates him to act. His reporting is a way for him to share the good things that are done, not his goal that just happens to get good things done along the way. I also like Chang, I thought he was quite fun, and I thought Thompson and Thompson here were even better than the last time. This is a very solid story, I'm getting in.
Ow! Where's my ear, Tyson?
The Broken Ear felt like the first time in which Tintin went downhill in quality, but it's still my second favourite so far. Once more, it has more adventure, more fun, more engaging storylines. I do wish it was a bit more solid. Blue Lotus was a genuinely solid story, with a serious tone, but moments for levity and some character building. Broken Ear still has some great moments, and a solid story. And I give it credit over a lot of other storylines so far, its random detour to Tintin becoming a revolutionary is one of the funniest comical sequences of any of these to me. General Alcazar is so over the top stupid and enjoyable that I actually found him fun. And the chase to find the fetish at the end was fun. I thought it was a solid sequence of events. I like seeing Tintin solve clues and figure out what's going on, even if it's maybe not as good as Lotus or even Cigars in that regard. The ending is fucking weird though. When were there demons in Tintin? Anyway, fun story, but no Blue Lotus.
Mr. Sir Henry motherfucker, he just jetted!
No More Heroes is a weird Tintin story. This is just one of those games I've wanted to play but never got the chance to. But now I have a copy of it and its sequel on the Wii, and if I enjoy those, I'll play the other two as well. So, how did I feel about No More Heroes? I enjoyed it. It's not particularly interesting story-wise, which is fine if the gameplay stands out, and thankfully, it does. It has some obvious Wii motion control bullshit, which is a real pain given my controllers. My controllers are weird. I have one controller that doesn't register the nunchuck properly, and one controller where the 1 and 2 buttons don't work, meaning I can't recharge my sword in this game. But I think the gameplay loop is very solid. Hacking a shit is fun. Doing the wrestling moves feels honestly pointless outside of bosses, but they were fun. The minigames were okay. I feel like the funny animations carried the minigames much more than the gameplay did. I think the only part I really got annoyed with was the slot machine's power-ups. Oftentimes, I'd only get them at the end, like when I kill my last enemy, and then like a short scene would play showing me going to the next area and the power-up would be gone. They were almost entirely useless most of the time to me. I also wasn't too big on the open world. It's just a way to get between places and nothing else. I guess I wouldn't have minded as much if I could fast travel, or even if failing at a mission because there's like a solid second of delay between flicking the remote and the motorcycle jumping didn't require me to drive all the way back to the part-time work building to reload the mission. Small issues though, the main gameplay loop is fine. I also like Travis. He's such a massive loser. He makes like being an otaku, jobless bum, and assassin all seem like the lamest thing ever, which is the point. Who would want to be this guy? He's such a loser. But he's charming. Otherwise, the characters were just fine. I feel like none of them were too notable outside of the fun ones, like Destroy Man or Bad Girl or the Magician Guy, and Henry was really funny for how fucking unimportant he ended up being. As for the bosses, the main meat of the game, well, Death Metal was an okay starting boss. Dr. Peace was a bit of basic fun, but you know, he was fun enough as an early game boss, and fun enough character who has some fun banter with Travis. Shinobu was an enjoyable fight. Not the most interesting of characters, but I get that they're kind of just parodying the whole "you killed my father" angle, and the actual fight was good. Destroy Man was super fun as a character, hilarious and stupid in equal measure, who hits you with the devilish deceptive handshake first thing. His boss was a bit basic though, you can kind of just bait him easily and kick the shit out of him. Holly Summers was not nearly as fun to me. I liked how she bounced off Travis and gave Travis some moment to grow as a character, and the boss was fine, but the falling into holes gimmick got old real quick. I was not engaged with that. Let's Shake was bullshit, not even remotely fun, you basically have to cheese the whole thing. Harvey, whatever, Magician Guy was a fun character, and I liked how he and Travis bounced off each other, but he dies in no time, so the actual fight wasn't much to me. Speedbuster was also not much. Nothing character, nothing boss battle, nothing a note here. But Bad Girl picked up the slack. She was very fun, even if her falling to the ground move is a bullshit beginner's trap that I kinda hated, but it only got me once. Her actual fight past that was great. I love her music, Pleather for Breakfast. By far my favorite track in the game. This sounds similar to a Terror EBM industrial electronic band like Cyclone 9. Then Jean was just like a really disappointing final battle. I just mashed the attack button and she did nothing. All of her attacks would get interrupted because when you attack her, she immediately tries to dodge. Eventually you'll get through to her, but because she drops everything to dodge, she basically never got a chance to attack me. But luckily for me, I had acquired all the katanas at max level by farming Assassin Mission 18 for an easy 150 grand each time. And so I got to the fantastic and fun as hell Henry battle. I love me a good mirror match boss fight, and this one was fucking great. And that made for a very solid ending to the game. I found the self-aware human in it amusing, and I liked how obviously satirical to the whole genre it was. I like No More Heroes. And I'm excited to eventually get around to the second game.
I will send you to Harambe.
The Black Island claimed the new top spot of my all-time favorite Tintin stories. It's a really damn fun one. It starts exciting with the crashing plane and Tintin getting shot. It moves forward at a brisk pace with the various little detective things going on, the occasional fun slapstick humor, and of course, Thompson and Thompson being fun as always. This actually might be my favorite outing of theirs so far. I just love how they find a guy fixing a plane, take the plane, and tell him to fly them, only to find out that he was just a mechanic. He doesn't know how to actually fly the plane. The Black Island itself is a fun little set piece. I liked Ranko the gorilla, I enjoyed the chase a lot. There's real class to this one. Aside from the random fireman bit that goes on a bit too long but is admittedly funny, it's bereft of filler and truly a good time. It also has some of the more tense scenes. It isn't always predictable how Tintin will prevail, but in a fun way. There isn't as much, well, you'll never guess what random bullshit's gonna happen. Tintin's creativity and resourcefulness is on full display. I love the Black Island.
Oh boy! Nazi, Nazi, Nazi! Oi, oi, oi!
King Ottokar's Scepter, I think, was quite fun. It's a great time, up there in my top 3 behind Black Island and Blue Lotus, including a new entire location in Sildavia, not based in any real country, and fleshing it out with history, customs, and an interesting culture to it that gives this story its own unique flavour among what came before. And the chase to the scepter is quite fun, a mad scramble full of entertaining and engaging moments. It's one of the most fun stories. The adventurous spirit is there, and I felt like it was a great time. Not much to say, honestly, it was just really good.
Follow me. Hang on a second. Did you say Haddock?
The crowd with the golden claws has the honour of introducing the goated Captain Haddock. Though in this story he's not great, kinda just a drunken asshole with no depth and not even really that fun. As interesting as it is to get to read a story that the Spielberg movie spent its first half adapting from, part of me wasn't really into it. It has its moments. I like Tintin's entire escapade on the boat, the escape, the encounter with the seaplane, the little adventure below ground that takes him back to Captain Haddock, but I can't deny it feels like an uninspired retread of Cigars of the Pharaoh, which does mean it's enjoyable and entertaining. I was hoping for a bit more though, and Captain Haddock really wouldn't be too great until later, I don't think. At first, I wasn't sure as to why Shooting Star had such a bad reputation, but apparently the version that I read is the revised one. The original had insane levels of anti-Semitism. Yikes and goodbye. But the one I read doesn't have that, so how was it? Fine. It has some things I like. I think the inclusion of shadows when the meteor is falling give it a really ominous look and foreboding vibe. Like, there's never any shadows for the characters in the main stories, but adding some in there really made it feel like shit was happening. The start with the scientist is kind of fun, and Captain Haddock was actually really good in this. They make drunk jokes without it just being look he's drunk. He gets to show off some intelligence, what actually makes him a good captain. Seeing someone who can just stick around with Tintin and devise conversation and strategy and support, without being like unable to communicate properly like Snowy, or too stupid for their own good like Thompson and Thompson, I think it adds a lot. On the other hand, the random exploding mushrooms and science fiction elements kind of fell out of place with the more contemporary stylings of Tintin. I think magic is a more natural progression for Tintin than straight up sci-fi space rocks with super growing metal effects. And the story itself wasn't really much more than Tintin finds out about a big rock, goes into the water, stands on the rock for a bit, goes home. Nothing great.
Whoa! It is a rainbow! Hey Charlie!
Secret of the Unicorn was quite exciting for me. It's the main thing the Spielberg film that introduced me to Tintin was based around. And in that regard, it's pretty good. It was great seeing how the pieces were taken out and put back together in different ways, and as a Tintin story, it's actually one of my favourites in terms of the chase and the mystery. I can tell why it was chosen for the film. Well, this and the fact that it has a second part to it. It's a very engaging and fun adventure, which does take all the standard Tintin tropes, but this time really expands on Captain Haddock. He might be my favourite character in the series, because he has a far more rich and developed history than most of them. He has notable development as a character from an ungrateful, bumbling arsehole in his debut, to the usually reliable and well-meaning big brother to Tintin. It's only let down as a story by the lackluster ending and villains. If that was nailed better, this would have maybe been my favourite story. If this had an extra 20 pages to include the main beats of Red Rackham's treasure, and if Rasputin was the main villain, this would have been my all-time favourite. But it's still damn good and a really fun adventure. I like how just resourceful Tintin is. Like, in the mansion he escapes using nothing but some bedsheets and a large block of wood that he's not even strong enough to lift. I can't complain too much about the lack of an ending either, because the One Piece is real! Red Rackham's treasure is one of the most slow and low energy stories, but I also found one of the funniest. It's just Tintin going off to find treasure at the coordinates they found in the last story. I had a fantastic time with that. It introduces Professor Carolus, who came way later than I expected, and establishes finally our main cast of the well-meaning and overconfident Tintin, the drunk, wild and fun Haddock, the scatterbrained, half-deaf genius Carolus, and the bumbling twits Thompson and Tonson. They are fucking hysterical in this one, maybe the funniest outing of the duo. I love the bit with the farm, I love how they act on the pump, both like too much and not enough. I find Haddock's alcoholism jokes way funnier than usual. Carolus is a delight. I fucking love this gag where the island's parrot population has passed down the screaming and swearing of Haddock's ancestor because he was such a potty mouth that all the parrots started copying him, and they did it so much that it continued to be passed down the generations. The final treasure being not the money, but literally and symbolically reconnecting Haddock with his ancestral history and bonding all the characters tighter is a very nice ending. Maybe it doesn't have the adventurous high stakes of the usual Tintin outing, but it was very funny and I liked it. The 7 crystal balls is very simple, but that's not a bad thing. It was a wake-up call as to exactly how great it is that Haddock took Snowy's place as the main secondary character, able to actually bounce off Tintin with dialogue, while Snowy could act more like a dog with his quirks, instead of just acting like a smaller human that Tintin couldn't talk to. The story is full of mysteries, the whole seizure situation, and the supernatural elements are surprisingly serious in how they're approached and delivered. It's some good stuff, and I did like the detective elements even if they weren't particularly explorative this time around. This wasn't a tale of a Tintin adventure, but rather Tintin in a deathly serious pseudo-supernatural mystery where people are falling around them. I think it's also funny how clear it is that Haddock is really struggling to try and maintain the new life he's supposed to have. He's struggling to adapt to not being on the seas and having to be refined. Carolus is also fun enough. I like the main duo having to go out to save him given how often they save one another. I'm not sure how I feel about the Incan villain's portrayal here, but it's not the worst. I'm just going to see what the second part does later. Alcazar's brief return was very fun though. Maybe not one of my favorites, but I do like it a lot.
So, when their ship's cannon obliterated this gigantic solar disk...
Prisoner of the Sun genuinely surprised me. I was fully ready for the savage Indian stereotype, but I was shocked to see actual nuance and consideration, at least for the time, put into how they were written. The Incans don't want our heroes dead because they are underdeveloped savages who get mad at sacrilege. There's an underlying justification in how their land and culture has been invaded, stolen, and crushed. It's reasonable they're mad after what they've been through, with people opening up their tombs and taking their culture away, with even their dead being desecrated. It's definitely odd that Tintin tricks them with an eclipse given they knew about those, but that's just a bit of a goof. Otherwise, this is a very engaging, well thought out story. While I liked Red Rackham's treasure for how funny it was, this actually carries on the vibe and energy of the first half in the previous story, and feels like a proper continuation of the tale that well develops things and makes for a satisfying conclusion. Yeah, I don't know why I struggle to say satisfying. I did also find comedy in this, in particular the last bit where Haddock spits on a random llama, then apologizes because all he wanted to do was get his pound of spit after being soaked by other llamas the whole story. The Thompsons maybe got a rough deal of it. Their gag is funny, but they're also not around much, and I felt like Carolus himself, despite being the whole reason for the plot happening in this half, doesn't get to show up much, and the 7 anthropologists whose fainting was the inciting incident for the story doesn't have much of a role here. It's a shame, but I like the story enough, and I like Zerino a lot. Seeing as I'd already watched Kamen Rider Goes Out of Order, I figured at this point after Drive, I would get into Amazons. I was very excited because I'm a big fan of the original Amazon. I was curious with how this darker and more serious take would be, and now it would sit with me. Season 1 I was really into. The darker and grittier tone I think worked great. The blood and gore is a natural extension from the original Amazon show, and the organic nature of all the monsters in it made a creepy, gross atmosphere. Some of the stories here are very dark, but the light of our main cast made it more entertaining than it could have been. Haruka is an enjoyable protagonist, if a bit mopey even if I understand why. I like seeing him come to accept himself and develop into someone who has more of a moral conscience in a world where everyone else has consigned themselves to a reality of kill or be killed. His friendship with Mamoru is great, Mamoru being the sweetest being and highly lovable. I can't say I got super attached to the rest of the Extermination Squad, but they all had their moments and strong banter between them that meant I was always entertained. The question as to what degree the Amazons deserve to live, I also think was handled fairly well. We can see exactly why humans despise them, but at the same time they're just doing what they are naturally driven to do. We see how much they can't help it, sometimes they regret being how they are. That does help to make Jin's side more reasonable. The other protagonist, apparently, of the show, though, overall to me it never really felt like he was a protagonist of the narrative. A bloodthirsty monster of a person who believes in a strong black and white morality of humans good, Amazons bad. Driven by nothing but his desire to see all of the Amazons dead at his feet. The dynamic between him and Haruka is great, and builds up to a really cool finale as they battle it out, and in the end, Haruka wins a new future for him and the Amazons. Mamoru grows up and decides to help out his people to try and find a way to live where they won't be ethnically cleansed by mankind, who end the show by creating a rainfall of acid that kills only the Amazons. Absolutely horrific, and a great way to make you see both sides of the argument here. Yes, killing all the Amazons could save humanity from extinction, but given we created the Amazons ourselves, the choice to take their lives away isn't as morally black and white as it seems. And that's the conflict between Haruka and Jin. Haruka is someone who sees the world in an optimistic way, and so shades of grey come in where some Amazons go too far and deserve to die, but some just want to live and deserve that chance, with even some humans pushing him to murder. Jin, on the other hand, is a bit different. He is a pessimist who believes in the simple binary of, if Amazons live, I will have killed all of humanity, because he created them, basically. And he decides to take it upon himself to kill them all. And so the show was really satisfying, and I never had anything bad to say, except that it was maybe a bit slow, and the extremely long episodes by Kamen Rider standards meant that I didn't always have the time to sneak an episode in. Yeah. Then Season 2 happened. This season, in a word to me, was boring. We get a new protagonist, Chihiro, who is fine, except that his story kind of feels like it means nothing in the end. Chihiro and Iyu, who is this weird bird lady Amazon that he gets attached to, do not feel like they develop to any kind of real conclusion. That is to say, Chihiro develops, but I don't think it really meant anything in the end. And Iyu remained fairly static until the last 2 episodes, and by that point I didn't care. Haruka was nothing here. Not only does he forget about half his methods of fighting from Season 1, but I also never felt anything past his first appearances, because he wasn't doing anything. Mamoru is this like super preachy guy who tries to forcefully convert people into being Amazons to serve his agenda. I could believe he would turn on humanity as he sees more of his people getting killed, but this is a level of maniacal behavior I just don't see in him. Especially when most of it is off-screen, and the little on-screen focuses more on Jin's side of the flashback than how it affected Mamoru. And Jin, I just got sick of him. Instead of having charisma and a point and depth, here he really was just lowered to a zombie that kills any Amazons. Which I can forgive. The idea that Jin has lost everything with his wife leaving him, and furthermore with their child being born, and resigning him to his fate because, in a way, losing his mind is the only way he's ever going to be able to bring himself to kill his own son. And, you know, it's an interesting way to go about it. I think it's cool how he gets blinded but is still able to fight, relying on his antennae and senses more than anything, while referencing an episode of the original Amazon show too. But I just got tired of him showing up, saying some shit, fighting Chihiro or Haruka, somehow losing, and then disappearing until his next pointless intervention. All this builds up to the raid on the main human headquarters, which gets resolved in all of 20 seconds as nothing happens. And then it builds up to the final battle between the 3 Amazons, which is entirely off screen, and Chihiro up and dies off camera. The final conflict between Haruka and Jin is never resolved. The fate of the Amazons is never resolved. The people who made the Amazons never get the comeuppance. All that gets resolved is that Chihiro dies off screen, Jin's wife explodes, and Mamoru dies surprisingly on screen in a scene that's sad, but not as sad as his original version Mole Beastman's death for me. I did get some emotional feeling when they find his little necklace though, the one that they were all wearing as a team, and realize that he was always wearing it. But none of this is helped by the tone and vibe of Season 2 being so dour. I wasn't engaged by the everything is fucked storytelling. I was bored, I was sick of it. I was seriously so disinterested in most of this season, it failed to capture me. And that leaves Amazons in an odd place where I really like Season 1, and I don't like Season 2. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Yeah, so I don't go to see most movies in cinemas, and most MCU films these days don't get a release down under on DVD. I refuse to waste money on a Disney streaming service, so it was only when I could find a Chinese copy of the film with the full English dub, well, that's just the original audio, that I was able to buy and watch it. I have very mixed feelings. Overall, I am solid on it. I think the movie is entertaining and funny, and the action's really good. They didn't skimp out on the gore, which I appreciate, but they did skimp out on the fun opening title sequence, which is a shame. Primarily, I really enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine themselves. They have a great rapport, and Ryan and Hugh have great chemistry. The Wolverine costume I think isn't necessarily like a great look, but it's nice to see any variation of the classic X-Men outfit in live action. It's good enough for me. Where I draw some issues is the storyline and how it works as a sequel to Deadpool 1 and 2. I like Deadpool 1 and 2 a lot. Story-wise, it's a bit wibbly. It's very meta, which I can appreciate, and that does make it work really well as a tribute to Fox Marvel films, with it being ostensibly about Deadpool and Wolverine trying to save the Fox characters from being erased by Disney's purchase of their parent company. We have Channing Tatum's Gambit from the unproduced Gambit solo film. We get references to multiple Punishers, all of whom are dead, and one of whom even has one of his villains show up to try and fight Gambit for some reason. We got the Deadpool Core, which to agree could be a reference to how many Deadpool projects never got to see the light of day. It's good in this regard, giving an ending to these characters and paying lip service to Fox's time with Marvel, treating them with respect even in the modern day. They're not the MCU films, they aren't even the modern day polished works of the era. And some like Elektra and Fantastic Four are even widely considered bad, but damn, they're still worth remembering. They're still a part of Marvel's film history, even if Sabretooth and Human Torch got done a little bit dirty, and man, Juggernaut too, especially with how his death is actually plot relevant, feels like he should have taken everyone to come together to kill him, not just Laura on her own. I know this isn't particularly like a popular Juggernaut, but he was far more unstoppable in X3 than he is here. But that said, as an actual sequel to Deadpool's films, I don't think it's very good. It retreads the same territory with the whole losing Vanessa storyline, but it also doesn't do anything with Deadpool's characters. Colossus and Negasonic get to show up in like 2 scenes and they don't do anything. This could be our chance to see comic-accurate Colossus and Wolverine interact. They don't do it. We could have had a comic-accurate Cannonball. The film just, decides to have the Fox returning cast fight a bunch of villains, which is fair, but at least these two got to show up at all. I mean, Cable and Domino and I guess Fire Fist don't get to show up at all. Juggernaut too, which is a shame because a double Juggernaut could have been really cool. But moreover, I don't think this is a natural continuation from the events of Deadpool 2. If you watch these as a normal trilogy, you get Deadpool, which then somewhat ramps up with the inclusion of time travel in Deadpool 2, but retains the same feeling, and then you get this exceedingly meta-contextual story about Fox's time with making Marvel films in the 3rd movie. In that regard, I think it's pretty bad. As an entertaining movie though, I think it's very solid. I had a good time, I had a good few laughs. More than a lot of post-Endgame films, I can say that.
Prepare for justice!
Kamen Rider Amazon's Last Judgment is completely mediocre. This is our finale movie for Amazons, but the main storylines either get resolved off-screen with the Amazon hunt, or don't get resolved at all, like the people in the company just continuing to get away with everything. Instead, the only thing resolved in this movie was Haruka and Jin's final fight, which is great and really well done. In particular, I like how they both lost the one thing they thought they'd hold true to. Haruka, despite being an Amazon, never wanted to eat a human, but he has to break that conviction to survive at the end. Jin has this strong never kill humans policy, but in this movie, because a human smells like an Amazon, he breaks that conviction and kills him. The two have nothing left but this fight, and that makes it dramatically tragic. The only reason they're fighting is because if they don't, they will have nothing left. They almost wouldn't mind if they died here, because if they live, there's nothing to do after that. But this movie is an hour and 40 minutes long, all in service of a sudden new plot development that has nothing to do with anything established. It's frustrating, This would have been fine if the show actually resolved anything, but no, there's open threads they just left to solve off screen. It's a big shame, because the movie is mostly just fine, but as a finale, it sucks. I wasn't engaged, I was just happy to get past this.
Anything can be bought with the right oil.
Land of Black Gold is a weird one. I guess I should make it clear, I'm reading, I think, the most recent version of these stories, or at least the second versions. So my one does feature Haddock in what is an admittedly very funny edition, and a poorly written one. That might be how I describe the whole story, if harshly. It's very funny, especially with the Thompsons and how they're just roaming around accomplishing nothing. Their whole bit is great, and Abdullah has some standout moments, but the main story was strange. The actual Formula 14 kind of disappears from the story and then comes back at the end. Mullah, I don't think, made for the most compelling of returning characters, and the story didn't have the same fun spirit of adventure. There's threads that I felt went nowhere, like the guy on the ship who goes loopy, or Barbell Air, and I don't even remember if there was a reason for the plane that appears suddenly. Throughout it though is this absolutely hysterical Thompson storyline, with a few exciting moments, so I think this is a fun story, if not one of the tightly written ones.
We are going to steal!
Pause for effect.
Destination Moon is a pretty fun story. I really like Calculus in this one. As much as I do enjoy Calculus' hard of hearing gimmick, I think the introduction of his hearing trumpet could better allow the story to be told without being as full of contrivance when he pulls off something that helps the others despite not having heard them, while still being able to have proper moments of comedy when the story needs him to, just because, you know, if you want the comedy, just have him not have the trumpet on him in that scene. His relationship with Haddock is great here. He's really funny when he gets super mad at being called a goat, which in the modern day takes on a completely different meaning. And the Thompsons may have a reduced role here, but I think it makes sense. This is Calculus' story compared to, say, Secret of the Unicorns duology, where it was introduced, where it was definitely Haddock's story. I do feel like this is a proper moment for his character to be expanded beyond the fun helper guy into a real defined individual with his own goals and dreams. His work more guided with a desire for action than scatterbrained everywhere nature initially allowed him. On the flip side though, the villains weren't up to much, the tension isn't there. It's not a very Tintin story, there's minimal adventure, it's atmospheric but in a different sense. I was sucked in because among the comedy and fun, the characters stood out here. The story could not have been done if Calculus and Haddock weren't already so established. I think going in with them, with interest in them, is what makes this story so good. On its own, doesn't have much going on, but the build up to the takeoff is very well done and very engaging. I did like that a lot and I wanted to see where it goes. Solid story. But now let's talk about... Explorers on the Moon is not the most exciting of Tintin stories. In fact, I personally rank it relatively low. But that's not because it's bad at all. It's great in its own unique way. Aside from the underground cave of ice, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was made as late as the 90s even, being so surprisingly accurate and steeped in reality. It does drone on a bit at times, and nothing much happens, but a few great moments, and especially some individual panels like the large one of Tintin actually being on the moon really add a lot. The Thompsons are a fun addition, seeing as they weren't known to be present on the rocket in the first half, and they add some important comedy that keeps the story from feeling too bogged down in its scientific accuracy. The reveal of Jorgen and the villainous role of Wolf are a bit whatever, but the sacrifice made by the latter is a genuinely emotional moment, and Jorgen actually being shot to death was a surprise for the series. I'd also like how seriously Haddock's potential death is taken. Yeah, it's kinda played for laughs in the end, but I do believe Tintin's friendship with the man, they're basically brothers. That's that though, it's not the most interesting story outside of the surprising context of his accuracy for the time.
She has a chicken with her.
Return to Oz is a really strange movie. It introduces a bunch of story elements from the books into something that's treated as a pseudo-sequel to the 1930s film, while also retaining elements exclusive to that aforementioned film in an odd way. Thus, this movie is a sequel to a hypothetical version of The Wizard of Oz that doesn't exist. The story is one of the weakest parts of the movie. Dorothy stumbles through an asylum, escapes, ends up in Oz, and then flies into a mountain where she frees everyone, and the villain kills himself. The journey is not nearly as interesting as before, and even ignoring how this is so different from the books, it's just not that engaging, even in concept. Dorothy goes to a random area, a building, flies to a mountain, that's it. The characters range from a really boring version of Dorothy, to the entire original cast as glorified cameos, to the okay versions of Jack Pumpkinhead and the Gump that don't live up to their book versions, to the Wogglebug and Sawhorse who aren't here, and TikTok, who is great. Very fun, very charming, very entertaining character who is just always funny, helped as he is by the incredible visuals. The movie is hard carried by how fantastic it looks. It's gorgeous and has fantastic set work and effects. The The wheelers look spot on, the head seems memorable, the stop motion for the Gnome King and his rock buddies is incredible. I love how he looks and how he slowly turns more human and becomes more normal by removing those who know of Oz. There's a recurring element of the direction of reflections and mirrors. Mirrors and how people look through them are a motif for the movie that helps to foreshadow Ozma's position as Dorothy's reflection. Unfortunately, she's barely a character and barely memorable. I even thought she was Glinda at first because she looks nothing like anything when she first appears. They also de-transed her. Cringe. I do get what they were going for. This movie tries to follow somewhat on from the 1930s film while actively canonizing the events of Oz as real and not dreams. It opens the question as to who is Dorothy's counterpart in Oz? If Oz is real, and thus everyone has a counterpart, where is Dorothy's? And while Ozma does not share Dorothy's face, she is the reflection of Dorothy. She is the only person from Oz to go to Earth, much like Dorothy is the only person from Earth to go to Oz. It works, and I like that. But it also means that Ozma, despite frankly being one of the protagonists of the whole book series, doesn't get very much impact on the story. Glinda also doesn't appear, and a couple of people get taken to prison, which is weird, because one of them was just a stern worker at the asylum who was a bit of a prick. Is that really prison worthy? The other guy, fuck him, but weird. Anyway, Return to Oz as a movie I think is just okay. I think there is a lot of places where it just kind of falls flat, and if it weren't for the incredible visuals, I don't think there'd be much reason to check the movie out. The Carolus affair is one strange Tintin story. It is on one hand a bloody fun adventure. Tintin and Haddock are all business this time, with an engaging chase to find the kidnapped Professor Carolus and the rising threat of weapons of mass destructions no longer being held back by clunky missile casings or dirty radiation remnants. Seeing the two solve their problems, figure out what's going on and work together was very fun. At the same time, Sildavia being villains was really hard to buy, given the previous two-part story arc involved their government being good friends to Carolus. Them now kidnapping him for their own gain feels odd. Like, I kinda get it, but Sildavia have never been the antagonist before, and it's rather pointless because in the end, it's the Borduria people that end up as the main foes. You could cut out the evil Sildavia stuff and streamline the story a bit without losing anything. Carolus making such a dangerous weapon also feels like it strains credibility, and doesn't really fit his consistency in creating things that aid in exploration and the pursuit of knowledge. And I don't like that ending, with the reveal that almost none of the journey mattered, because the information that the villains needed had been left at home the whole time. Combined with the Thompsons barely featuring and no memorable villain, you get one of the most conflicting Tintin stories to me. It's definitely very fun, and also very disappointing in many a way.
Great! The gang's all here. Now we could die together!
The Red Sea Sharks is a lot. It's self-aware, it's dramatic, it firmly establishes Herge's anti-racist stance in the face of some of his earlier stories. The book was actually really fun. It includes a lot of callbacks and cameos that rewarded me for reading everything prior, and helps flesh out the world while also giving quick updates as to how the characters are doing. Their stories continue and it helps make the world feel larger. But the story is also surprisingly ahead of its time. It has a very modern sense of self-awareness to it. It lampshades the absurdity of all the cameos in a really funny and natural way by not making it completely unreasonable. It does bring back a little more of that shit happens and our characters luckily survive type of writing that older stories have, but even that might be an intentional callback. It's a very charming story, even if Scoot is left without time to introduce and endear himself to the cast. The Thompsons and Carolus sadly don't get to do much, but the main journey is really fun. The final boat battle where the crew are just trying to dodge torpedoes until help arrives is fantastic. It's a great mixture of comedy, tension, and intensity. Every panel oozes with a sense of urgency, while also not losing the opportunities for a good joke, and Haddock gets to show his captaining skills again. I'm also surprised by how fair the depiction of the Africans is here, considering the time period. Yes, they're still drawn in a certain way, but they aren't portrayed in a directly and intentionally negative light, just through a light inevitably cast by its time period. They don't communicate with our heroes easily, but it's because English isn't a language they're good at, understandably so. Their lack of trust makes sense given the last white people they encountered were heinous, but Haddock is able to communicate with one of their authority figures and they have no issues working together. Haddock is also shown as more enraged by the attempt at slave trading by armed villains than anything else in the whole series prior, firmly establishing the franchise as wanting to be anti-racism. I think it's also interesting how Rastapopoulos' nature as the Moriarty of Tintin becomes way more palpable here. Like with Moriarty, he's barely in the story and only sometimes shows up, but this book reveals him to be the center of a web that spans many of the antagonists we've seen, and likely more. Not in a way that limits the story's scope. These villains are still disconnected from each other. Instead, it expands Rastapopoulos by positioning him in the center of the criminal world in a way that directly opposes Tintin's role as the center of all of the heroes. I really like the Red Sea Sharks, a lovely little retrospective of the whole series up to that point, and feels like a fun, cameo-filled fan service package.
And use an ancient Tibetan meditation technique to astral project out of my body.
Tintin in Tibet was oddly moving. There's a simplicity to everything, but an emotional core that really hit me in a way that I don't think Tintin had prior. Perhaps because, for the first time, this really is Tintin's story. In most stories, the narrative either revolves around a new place Tintin's exploring, or the shenanigans of Haddock and Calculus that Tintin helps with, maybe the machinations of the evil villain that Tintin thwarts. Here though, this is Tintin's story. There's no villain, there's no grand plan. It's nothing more or less than Tintin's immovable desire to never give up on a friend who has suffered a tragedy. The inciting incident is a plane crash. A simple plane crash that can happen to anyone. Tintin refuses to accept that his friend Chang died in it, and the story follows his unshakable strength of character as he marches forth to try and save him. Anytime he gets a hint of possibility that Chang might have survived the plane crash, he sees it through. Furthermore, Haddock's own ties to Tintin are shown strongest here. Repeatedly in this story, Haddock gives up and leaves Tintin, only to realize he can't do it, and he goes back to make sure his buddy's okay. Their recurring theme of friendship and friends looking out for one another was palpable, and in the end, when Tintin saves Chang, it's a great moment. I really felt happy to see them reunited, because Tintin for once got to resolve a problem that was related to him. He saved someone because that person was his friend, and not just because it was the right thing to do. There's a relatability to that motivation that made me care. There is also a Yeti, which I can do without, but I appreciate that it's not some wild monster. It's human, like the rest of us, and it helps Chang. You feel bad for it once they leave. Knowing the history of this comic and how it came to be also made me appreciate it more. It's so moving because this is kind of a wish fulfillment for the writer. It was his desire to see an old friend whom he lost contact to due to a tragedy brought to page, but the loss of someone he once cared deeply for too, represented by the Yeti. This might be my favorite Tintin comic. This is the first time I've really felt it was Tintin's story. This is where I really and truly connected with him as a character, and I'm so glad to have reached that point.
Smile! I am smiling.
Yeah, so it was during a conversation with Biffweed where I realized that I forgot to look into the other Kamen Rider Drive content. Whoops. So I started it with Drive Saga Chaser, the first of the Drive sagas. It's a decent film. I like the idea of a random side story wherein Chase just wants to get more emotion, and it does get to show a new side of him. Or I guess it reinforces a side of him that is willing to improve himself, but not to put a human in danger by this point. I wish he wasn't so out of character for a lot of it, even if it was justified by how the villain's power works, but it is what it is. Excel got to appear, and Double just continues to never miss when it comes back in any way. Ryu is great in this film. Very charming and fun, the setup is perfect, I love how he bounces off Shinosuke, and him talking to his child on the phone and acting way more cutesy than usual is so charming. Aside from that, very little to say. Good movie.
You mean the Chaos Emeralds?
The Cassia 4 Emerald is a nice experimental Tintin comic, but not very interesting to me. I like the idea of a story taking place entirely in Marlinspike. It goes against the standard spirit of adventure to show an unusual situation for our heroes. This in turn highlights how amusing it is that an unusual situation for our heroes is just being at home. But as a result, this means that stuff must happen, right? Except not really, not much goes on. There's a Romani encampment, and I do appreciate that once Haddock's prejudices are challenged, he's willing to change his ways and treat the Romani with respect. He even starts calling them the Romani instead of that other word, which in modern parlance has become a slur. After that, Cassia 4 shows up and nothing much happens. In the last 6 of the story, the Emerald gets stolen and Tintin investigates. This I think should have come much earlier. Tintin investigating stuff is the most interesting part of the story. It's just a shame the reveal is so out of nowhere and out of place. The Romani sword just fuck off and add nothing to the narrative, and the comedy wasn't hitting as much to me in this one. I dare say the only thing that kept me entertained is that I really like most of the characters, because most of the clues building up to the reveal don't stop the reveal from sucking. I think Tintin spending only 10 pages looking for clues and finding the red herrings wasn't good enough for me. I wasn't super into this one.
Did you take me in vain? Oh, poor little Wade. Oh, you've awakened his true verbal pain.
Oh, the PS2 Narnia game. It's not great, mate. It's got its moments, like some of the pure combat levels, but for the most part, this is a bad game with bad mechanics. It's divided into a bunch of levels. Within these levels, most of the time, you have access to all 4 of the Pevensey kids. Some levels you only get 2 or 3, but generally, you have access to a bunch of abilities. To a degree, it makes it feel like a discount LEGO game. You have 2 collectibles, statues that can be used in the second last level to purchase supporting abilities, which is actually really cool, because not only does it reward the player for collecting everything, but it comes off like every statue you free from the White Witch's control comes together for the big final war. The other collectibles are just bonus items that give you nothing but completion, which can unlock a few relatively uninteresting bonus levels and pointless extra content. Hey! Aside from that, it's just get through each level, and what levels they are! Some of them are fine, like the combat-based ones, but some are meandering and slow. There's some really annoying parts like the dwarf mini-boss, the ice slide, the fucking beaver hole battle, where you have to jump between different points, which would be fine if your allies did anything! But I found most of the time that the fucking Pevensey just stand around doing fuck all and let enemies run in and take a swing at you. The stealth level with Lucy and Susan was rather annoying, and it felt like I just needed a bit more time to work out the kinks of how everything interacts, or they needed more time. The gameplay. They needed more time to iron out the issues. As it is, I swear sometimes nobody saw me, and then it plays a cutscene anyway to send me back to the start of the level. As far as licensed games go, this could have been much worse, but I'm definitely now upset that Narnia didn't get the full 7-movie treatment, and then after that, a badass LEGO game about the series. That would have been sick as hell.
A huge supply of tish comes from my chocolate starfish.
This year's Valentine's Day event felt really simple by Valentine's Day standards to me. We got to meet Andromeda, who was really lovable and sweet and a great addition to Fate Grand Order, and Charon, who was a great character, and a great way to make Columbus likable without having to actually make Columbus likable. But most of it was formulaic. You go to place, you see a character's chocolate double, you beat them up, rinse and repeat. The ending was fine, and Durga's segment was actually really fucking cool, but aside from that, very little to say. I feel like Andromeda and Semiramis' friendship was really fun though. I never even considered Semiramis having a mother-daughter relationship with anyone before, but it's actually really sweet and endearing. I like that one.
What the hell is this?
Fly 714 is a low point of Tintin for me. Not quite as low as the first 2 stories, but definitely not up to the standards of everything else. Aside from a few amusing gags and the return of Squid from the Red Sea Sharks, I did not enjoy this one. For one thing, it heavily features Rasputin in a way that takes away everything he ever had as a character. He goes from an entertainingly evil background figure who was the center of a deathly serious criminal web into a gag villain who lacks an identity. He starts jumping around and acting like any other random Tintin villain. Alan even goes downhill from the competent henchman vibe he had before. The main story doesn't go anywhere. Tintin jumps on a plane with Haddock and Carolus, they get taken to Rasputin's private island, there's some random running around, Tintin gets a telepathic message that takes him down a specific path that requires no actual skill or intelligence from Tintin himself, and then there's like a genuinely cool volcanic eruption bit. I think the art quality and composition carries how good it looks overall, but then aliens show up. Now I do appreciate that the aliens are almost entirely off-panel and in a flying saucer, but then they give everyone amnesia, so the entire story has no purpose. The characters didn't grow, nothing has been placed into the universe of Tintin that is worth bringing up again. It all ends with walls of text, and that's it, it's done. The story has some funny moments, I'll admit, but it's hardly enough to be worth reading. I think the alien reveal is not just out of place, but instead of Tintin going to this location because it's where the story is and everything in that location playing into that, this story has Rastapopoulos choose where Tintin goes and just happen to choose the one island on the planet where aliens were connected to it without knowing in a way at all. Like, what? This book adds nothing and instead took away from things like Rastapopoulos' position and even Alan's personality. I did not like Flight 714.
Space Marines, today the enemy is at our door.
I picked up Warhammer 40,000 Command Squad in a local retro video game store for the DS because it was a 40k game that I'd not heard of before. But I think there's a good reason for that. It's not good. At times it's good. Commanding the troops around and thinking about firing distance and positioning does give this a vaguely similar feeling to the tabletop game, and each level you complete unlocks new units and war gear that helps the gameplay stay interesting. The only issue is that it often feels like the best strategy is the worst one. Do nothing. Let the enemy come to you and get gunned down. Anytime I ran forward to be proactive and get shit done, A flood of 4 new enemies I didn't know about before would show up and start shooting, and I'd lose my troops. It's just a matter of patience and boring gameplay, relying on the obscenely overpowered Overwatch mechanic to let troops run into you and get shot down. I didn't find the stages interesting, and I honestly didn't find the game interesting. The DS version had awkward controls and ugly graphics too, which did not help.
I'm a Kamen Rider!
I actually forgot to write about this one, which is crazy, because I loved this. Surprisingly so, given I thought Hart had a perfect ending in Drive. But Hart's segment of this manages to extend his story in a perfectly natural way, giving a more bittersweet ending for him, Brain, and Medic that I think they absolutely earned after all they did. Hart learning to properly respect what makes humans special and coming into his own as a Kamen Rider, even if only for the tail end of his life, genuinely made me feel something. Man, this was really good. And Maha's side is good too, but it felt like it should have come first just because it doesn't hit nearly the same. Still good, I liked it, nice to see him solve that mystery and all, but Hart had my full attention.
And you've been... No!
Ozma of Oz is the third Oz book, and one that I vastly prefer to the Return of Oz version, like the movie one. I think people who say that the Return to Oz movie accurately adapts the intended tone of the book have never engaged with the book in its own terms. The Wheelers and Languidia are treated as initially scary, but are actually quite goofy in the book and far more charming. Languidia I think is hilarious. She is motivated to help Dorothy, because having to spend 10 minutes every day doing something other than admiring herself is too much. She wants someone else to rule. My favorite part of the book though is definitely Ozma and how she interacts with Dorothy. I think it's a shame that Ozma lacks the sass and attitude she had in the last one, but that can be understood to be because she's been taught how to act prim and proper like a queen should. She and Dorothy get close quickly and they interact well. I enjoyed the newcomer in the Hungry Tiger, a play on the Cowardly Lion with an interesting approach. His hunger is always there, but he chooses not to satiate it with what he wants to eat. The lion claims to be a bad lion because he's a coward. The tiger claims to be a bad tiger because he's not savage enough. The Gnome King makes a great debut. You can see why he thinks he is in the right. The royal family whom Ozma and Dorothy need to save were legally sold to him, and not wanting them to suffer as slaves, he turns them into ornaments that we find out have no consciousness or awareness. From our perspective, that's fucking horrific. Awful thing to do, but you can also understand why his dumbass would think it's okay. You shouldn't agree with him though, he's not the good guy. He is a sole loser, but that's the only thing from his perspective that he actually does wrong, breaking his word. I appreciate the book doesn't retread the Wicked Witch approach of the eggs instantly kill the king from nowhere. Instead, he explains their poison in a fit of rage, and it's the fear of eggs the Scarecrow uses to succeed, not the fact they're actually poisonous to him. It's honestly a really fun sequence. It might be my favourite of the Oz books so far. I really like how all the pieces come together and all the characters interact. The book openly admits to being a 1907 Yuri story, where they claim that Dorothy would come to quickly love Ozma, and Ozma immediately makes Dorothy royalty, is broken to see her leave, and makes sure that Dorothy could return to Oz whenever she wants. I like the heroes, I like the villain, I like the story. I thought it was often quite funny as usual and whimsically fun, without any of the issues such as the first book's scattershot nature, and far more frequent usage of and then shit happens storytelling, or the second book's unfocused story, and often random elements that add nothing. I'm hoping the books continue to improve. I really liked Ozma of Oz.
That's it?
And we come to the end of the proper Tintin stories. Tintin and the Picados, or however you pronounce that, is sad. It's slow and a bit boring and lacks life to me. While I appreciate the more serious tone and themes, it also feels like very few of the characters I care about mattered. Carolus added precisely one thing, Haddock makes one major choice, and then after that the plot just happens. Tintin barely feels like he needs to be there. It's primarily Alcazar's story, and even then all the goofiness and fun that I love about the characters is almost entirely gone. He's just some revolutionary now, indistinguishable from any other, lacking the comical over-exaggeration and fun elements that I liked about the character initially. The Thompsons and Bianca are barely there despite being so important. It's disappointing to end the true canonical stories with this. It's really not much at all to me. I think it's boring, I don't think it's very funny. There's no spark of adventure. It's not as nonsensical and harmful as some of the others. It makes sense. It's just not very fun. But now I can share my personal ranking from worst to best of every Tintin story. So it is The Shooting Star Anti-Semitic Edition, Tintin in the Congo, Tintin in the Land of Soviets, Flight 714 to Sydney, the Shooting Star Non-Anti-Semitism Edition, Tintin in America, The Crab with the Golden Claws, Tintin and the Picados, The Land of Black Gold, The Castia for Emerald, The Calculus Affair, Explorers on the Moon, Cigars of the Pharaoh, The Broken Ear, Red Rackham's Revenge, Destination Moon, Prisoner of the Sun, King Ottokar's Scepter, The Seven Crystal Balls, The Red Sea Shark, The Secret of the Unicorn, The Blue Lotus, The Black Island, and finally, Tintin in Tibet, with those top 3 being relatively interchangeable, but I gave the bonus to Tibet for being the most Tintin-driven of the stories. And now we're on to the final moment for February where I go over the movies that I watched for different rankings. So, they were The Bad Guys 2, Claude, Legend of Sasquatch, Bigfoot Country, Chickenhare and the Hamster of Darkness, Scooby-Doo Meet the Brew Brothers, Bratz Starring and Stylin', The Adventures of Tintin, Mirai Ninja, Bigfoot the Movie, Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, The Clockwork Girl, Bratz Rock Angels, Appleseed Alpha, Bigfoot the Movie the Sequel, Ethel and Ernest, Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, Bratz Genie Magic, Double Dragon, American Bigfoot, Fire Breather, Scooby-Doo and Arabian Nights, Bratz Babies the Movie, Bigfoot at Hollow Creek Canyon, Savage the Bigfoot Legend Lives, Bigfoot Path of the Beast, The Badge, the Bible and Bigfoot, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, Bratz Passion for Fashion Diamonds, A Christmas Carol, The Haunted World of El Superbeasto, Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, Bratz Baby Magic, Heavy Metal, Scooby-Doo Alien Invaders, Bratz Kids Sleepover Adventure, Tokimeki Memorial, Heavy Metal 2000, Scooby-Doo Cyber Chase, Bratz Fashion Pixies, and Scooby-Doo and the Legend of the Vampire. Now let's head back to the Versus artwork. You'll notice, this is how big it was last time, this is how big it is now. And that's because I've added this. We got some big boys taking up a lot of space, but that's not all there is to it. The matchups this time have been Getter Emperor versus Godzilla Ultima. Note that this is because I finished my run of all the Getter manga this year, even though I started last year. Also, I still fully support Getter vs. Mazinger, this is just specifically for Emperor. Captain Morgan Moonscar from Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island versus Judge Nathaniel Hopkins from Paranorman. The Phantom Virus from Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase versus Krem Zeke from Transformers. Lena from Bratz Fashion Pixies versus Laverna from Barbie Fairytopia. The Living Corpse versus Ghost Roaster from Skylanders. And finally, Tintin vs. Spirou from Le Petit Spirou. That's that. Yeah, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one, fellas. Okay, everyone, that would be the end of my February segment of new media that I've consumed this year. So thank you for watching, if you've gone through the whole thing, or even if you just click through just to the stuff that you're interested in. I hope you all enjoyed, yeah, I won't hold you too much longer. March is currently available on my Patreon for you to go right now if you want to. Link in the description, and all my supporters on Patreon are scrolling by right now. Thank you so much. And I have kind of given the opportunity for anyone who wants to ask me any questions about stuff that I didn't bring up in the new media that I've consumed, you know? And they didn't. They did not. They absolutely did not do that. They just kind of did the normal thing where they sent me random stuff. So, let's look at that. You know what? You're the real deal. No wonder the Avengers took you, and the X-Men. They don't just take anyone. I mean, you are a serious, mature, intelligent thinker. I have never met a kinder, more attention-deserved, confident, bigger man in my entire life. And that says a lot, because I've been alive for more than 200 fucking years. And I'll tell you, that bold chick was wrong about one thing. You will save the world. You could even save a relationship with a goddamn self-respecting woman. Motherfucker, I wish I could say you'll live forever, but it's one of God's worst jokes that you can die. Except that's on all of you. You got some in the same mouth. I like how it still ends in the same way. Rom of Space Knight's cool. I've not read much of Rom stuff. I have no intention to add it to my incredibly long list of stuff to get to. But Rom's pretty cool. MCU ranking. Now, the problem with doing an MCU ranking, one, is that it is very much overdone. I know I did Scooby-Doo, which you could argue, it probably is overdone as well. At least I would imagine. For all I know, there are very few Scooby-Doo movie rankings out there. But that was for a birthday thing. And it's kind of in line with what I do. And the MCU is, I think, it's a bit much. There's a lot in there, and I think I just wouldn't have anything new to say. Yeah, Winter Soldier's pretty damn good. Civil War is quite solid. Infinity War is incredibly well put together given the circumstances. Endgame is a great finale, so-so movie, and not perfect at wrapping up everything despite its length. Fantastic Four's great, Thunderbolts is great. I don't think I'd have anything like interesting or new to say. But I could at some point. I'm not sure. Part of me feels like doing pre-MCU Marvel movies is probably more in character for me. Like, who else would want to cover stuff like the old Doctor Strange film, you know? My thought on Doomsday at the moment, God, it looks shit. It could be good. It could be good, you know? But the trailer is just a bunch of guff. The X-Men coming in out of fuck knows where. I was watching something in the cinema recently, and one of my friends, I don't remember which one, turned to me when we saw the X-Men will appear in Doomsday trailer before the film, and asked, what movie brought them in? And I was just sitting there thinking, dude, the movie that brought them in was Doomsday. I mean, I guess you could argue Deadpool and Wolverine, but like that's, I don't know if I would really argue that. Just because it brought the Jiggernaut back from X3 doesn't mean it brought back the X-Men. Like the Gambit shot and some of the other shots like that kind of felt like they were very, yeah, you're just doing that to try to get, like, it's just throwing things you recognize on screen. And the whole bit of like Thor, the bit with Thor attacking Doom and Doom just stopping it, unless that is God Emperor Doom and it takes place near the end of the movie, and they're going to do an Infinity War type ending, and they just like edited it in the trailer so it's not God Emperor, it's regular Doom now, like they CGI'd it to be regular Doom. If that's not the case, that's so stupid, because that's not even like, it feels like they don't understand not only what makes Doom appealing, which is that he talks a big game, but his bark is way bigger than his bite, and that's because he's a lot more of an intelligent villain than a physical one. You know, Doctor Doom picks a fight with Thor, he's going to get his shit pushed in if he just goes in the way you see it in the movie. But if he did pick a fight with Thor, which would be very unlikely for him, he's going to have some sort of, like, incredible, like, backup strategy. You know, he's going to have something in the background to deal with Thor, like a loved one in danger even, or like some sort of device that'll make Doom slightly out of phase with time so that Thor tires himself out, attacking nothing, and Thor will be like, oh, by Odin's beard, how is this the case? Thy body is immune to my blows. Some shit like that, you know? But he's not just going to stand there and take a hit from Thor with a weapon stronger than Mjolnir and just walk it off. How many Kamen Riders are there? Well, I don't actually know. For one thing, I'm only up to, by the time of this part, I'm only up to Amazons. By the time I'm actually getting this video out, I've watched up to 01. And there's still, you know, Saber, Revice, Gotchard, Gav, so on. Does every character in fiction have a Kamen Rider match? No, that would be stupid. There are characters in fiction that don't have matches at all, that people don't even fucking know. How many of you have a fucking matchup for Eddie from Chain Chronicle? You know, how many of you have a matchup for him? No? How many of you know who that is? Even the one of you out there who knows what Chain Chronicle is, do you remember Eddie? No, you don't. Don't be stupid. I do not need to watch 9 hours of Barnacle. For one thing, I have already experienced a chunk of Barnacle. For another thing, I'd rather just spend the time reading the comics, reading the novels, and playing the games that have been archived. That's what I would rather do. I just, it's Manchester Black as fart. Yeah, that was that. As you can see, nobody had any fucking questions. I mean, like, hey, what do you think about, like, this part of No More Heroes? Or, what was your thoughts on this element of Getter? Or, hey, I mean, how'd you feel about anything I didn't say about the first Lego Batman? You know, no one had anything to say about that. No one wanted to know, like, what were my thoughts on the rest of the Amazon? I don't remember what I said about Kamen Rider Amazon. It's been a while, but, like, do I think Amazon should be made canon to the wider Kamen Rider universe of the Heisei era? The answer would be no. No, not at all. I don't think it should at all. No one had any questions, so I guess, like, yeah, fuck it. Yeah, okay, goodbye everyone. Have a good one. Fuck it.